I give the floor to Jaroslav Najbert, who is a teacher, history, a practical person, and who cooperates with us. He's our partner, our institute's partner, and he really is going to deal with how to teach the descendants of the orderly citizens of real socialist Czechoslovakia. A wonderful question. You look at it this way.
So, my dear audience, Labadena, I'm also a teacher at one secondary grammar school, and I can see some really tired faces, but I don't mind because I'm used to see similar faces in my classroom when the lecture is almost over. Anyway, we believed that it was worth waiting till the last session because we are not going to talk about the past, but about the present, which is, according to my experience, really interesting. I'm starting with a question, how to teach. It's not a simple question, and before answering, let me talk more about historical education. If we talk about historical education, many of my colleagues still believe that teachers are popularizers of the historical science, and the pupils more or less reproduce the facts of the past which historians wrote in textbooks. Well, the reality of school is different. First of all, teachers can't wait 20 years till historians tell us what the communist regime was like and what we should teach. Moreover, we have to put up with different historical consciousness of students, which may cause serious troubles if confronted mutually. And last but not least, modern history is not a closed historical process. Many topics of the recent history have become the subject of discussion outside the school environment, and the interpretation is complicated due to political or property reasons. Confrontation with still living actors of witnesses of historical events raised the need to pass on pupils analytic and interpretative tools that will help them to handle with this plurality of opinions and interpretations in their practical life. Therefore, modern teachers tend to present the past as the pluralism of opinions on the causes of circumstances of the historical events. We call it multi-perspective approach. Now let me introduce, now it's working. Let me introduce one specific problem connected with this reality of school environment, and that is the problem of family memory of communist dictatorship in school education. For your information, while talking about historical memory, I follow the concept of memory formulated by French sociologist Maurice Halbwachs, or more precisely, its later modification by Jan Assmann. We basically distinguish between the cultural and communicative, or rather family memory. With cultural memory, I understand the complex of steady interpretative models of the past that is shared within the defined community, in our case, within the post-communist Czech society. In the formation and transmission of cultural memory are significantly involved institutionalized forms of communication, such as official text, rituals, or celebrations. The institution of school can be seen as one of the major carriers and mediators of this cultural memory. In contrast, family memory is tied to the existence of living communicators and experience bearers. Countless numbers of family memories contains distinctive family understanding and interpretations of the past. Simply formulated, Czech cultural memory of the August 1968 contains the story of Soviet tanks in the streets of Prague. My family memory contains the story of my dad enjoying summer holiday with my grandparents. Now back to school. Teachers work with historical memory because they like to do oral history projects. After all, normative documents encourage teachers to work with memory. The characteristics of the educational field history from framework educational program establishes its mission as, I quote, the cultivation of the individual historical consciousness and the effort to maintain the continuity and historical memory, especially in terms of passing on historical experience. These objectives, what historical experience we should pass and what we should keep in the memory depend to a significant extent to the autonomy of individual schools or rather individual teachers. The curricular speech is not specific, it only orients the teacher toward the formation of positive civic attitudes, to developing a consciousness of belonging to European civilization and culture, and to promoting the adoption of the values on which contemporary democratic Europe is founded. These objectives can be found in memory of active opponents or victims of undemocratic regimes in Czech environment, the Nazi occupation and communist dictatorship. The main purpose of this memory is a living presentation of desirable attitudes and behaviors, not primarily objective recognition of the past. Memories of political prisoners and opponents of communist dictatorship have certainly an unquestionable place in historical education in post-communist states. The problem is that the majority of my students are not children of political prisoners. They are descendants of the orderly citizens of real-socialistic Czechoslovakia. Again, simply formulated, the government and many teachers feel the need to commemorate the experience of political prisoners, collectivization, oppression of Prague Spring Reform and dissent. And how about the family memory? The research of family memory in post-communist states is merely at the beginning. We may follow German colleagues who have plenty of experience with researching the memory of the Nazi regime. We can open, for example, a book, My Grandfather Wasn't Nazi. In this study, Harald Welzer, with his colleagues, basically stated that while in Germany there is an obvious strong pressure of cultural memory to condemn Nazi crimes, the family memory is largely immune against this awareness of Nazi crimes. Stories that have been passed on in families for generation of children and grandchildren are interpreted in order to rid family members of any shadows of Nazi horrors. At our institute, we coordinate an oral historical project called Velké a malé příběhy moderních dějin, which is in English, Great and Small Stories of Modern History. The main task of the project is to confront the great history, as presented in history textbooks, with the so-called small history. The project consists of three basic parts: the methodological schooling for children, the realization of interviews followed by their final analysis. Last year we set the theme My Family and the Era of Normalization, which we would like to deepen in coming years. And for your information, normalization following the Prague Spring Reform and closed by perestroika is probably the most questionable era of the Czechoslovak communist regime. You may probably know the story of Czech dissent, represented by Václav Havel. Despite dissent's activity, 99% of population supported or rather did not revolt against the communist regime until the collapse of Soviet Union in the late 80s. And during 3 years we have collected approximately During 3 years, we have collected approximately 220 interviews from pupils of elementary and secondary schools. The collection does not represent balance simple of memories of pre-1989 Czechoslovak society, but after all, it was not our intention. You can see the characteristics of the sample on the slide. And now, let me formulate some conclusions concerning the relation between the family memory and education of modern Czechoslovak society. For many students working on the project was their initial experience with method of oral history. In most cases, narrators and interviewers were connected with some kind of family relationship, and this affected the content and form of testimony. The function of family storytelling is specific. A family interview becomes a medium for creating an image of the past. Parallel to the information received from textbooks, there is another important reference system for the interpretation of the past. A system which consists of concrete figures, parents, grandparents, pictures, family photos. To a certain extent, recorded testimony illustrates the process of remembering, which is an active remodeling of the past and is updating at the same time. Narrators obviously showed effort to influence the interviewer through evaluation and formulating theses which have largely exceeded the level of a mere reproduction of the facts about the past. Captured memories confirm the findings of some historians that Czech society does not recall the period of communist dictatorship uniformly. We can find different ways of relating to the past. The negative evaluation prevailed, but what is interesting, there is lack of conflict remembering in the families. Neither narrators nor interviewers met with a clear willingness to challenge moral attitudes or values of family members in the times of normalization. Communists have disappeared from the families. If there is a morally problematic practice, the responsibility is often downplayed or externalized with reference to the nature of the time or regime. Witnesses' spontaneous confession of a membership in the Communist Party was quite exceptional phenomenon. The unwillingness to start a conflict is most clearly shown in the topic of stealing socialist property. Despite some exceptions, the stealing is advocated by a contemporary slogan, "Who doesn't steal robs his family." Shame over the theft was in many cases displaced with satisfaction over own ingenuity connected with hunting goods in need. In response, the students who, according to my own experience, have developed a strong sense of protection of private property, did not need to complain that their witnesses have committed a theft. Likewise, interviewers did not need to challenge the fact that their relatives repeatedly lied on public or acted contrary to their consciousness in case of elections, public rituals, etc. Of course, it's necessary to take into account the incomplete structure of the witnesses and thus the limitations of empirical knowledge. But I think in Czech families there is slowly starting the similar interaction between family and cultural memory, as described for the German environment by Harald Welzer. On the one hand, there are obvious anti-communist attitudes of most students who are involved in the project. At the same time, however, we don't find among the relatives active bearers of the values and attitudes against which the pupils define. My interpretation in analogy to Welzer's conclusions is that pupils' attitudes may be a demonstration of anti-communist attitudes prevailing in the Czech cultural memory or educational process. In their reflections, students denounce the restriction of personal freedoms, persecution of opponents of communist regime, or a dictatorship as a form of government. Concurrently, family stories of normalization create such an image of family history so that students can take the view that communists were bastards. But afterwards, they could add that there were no bastards in their families. I can imagine that in less than 20 years, a study entitled "My Grandfather Was Not a Commie" would be very topical in Czech environment. And I ask myself if the Czech case is specific or teachers in all post-communist states face the similar problem. I would like to put emphasis on the fact that a research of family memory in Czech environment is at its very beginning, and also the German findings cannot be analogically applied to the Czech environment. Moreover, between the relatively homogeneous German cultural memory of the intensive phase of Nazi regime and the Czech memory, already memories of 40 various years of communist dictatorship, are many substantial differences. Anyway, the interpretation of the family memory projects goes further. It should be noted that multi-perspective approach is methodologically challenging and can be problematic. Some teachers already try to interpret memories in lessons, but in some cases the confrontation resulted in conflict among supporters of different perspectives. A confrontation provoked a class discussion, but the class did not reach any synthetic conclusion. This discussion can be seen not only at schools but also in public. Members of Czech government Liberal Party would never sing the same song as the communist opposition. Czechs in pubs are able to have serious arguments concerning the communist era. Whatever may positions which depart from the prevailing attitudes in the classroom or otherwise from the prevailing anti-communist Czech cultural memory be in minority, we mustn't be satisfied with only simple capturing family narrative. On the one hand, students actively learn a wide range of information about communist dictatorship, but at the same time, they can take over from their relatives various attitudes and values which in a later confrontation may have conflict potential. As my colleague Jaroslav Pinkas pointed out during the expert meeting of Czech and German oral historians held this September in Prague, in case we emphasize tolerance to be important value of present education, it's not possible to repress this non-conforming interpretation of the past and from a position of authority repressively say, "You're wrong, boy, your reflection of the past is wrong, you have to look at it this way." We mustn't discredit the perspectives, but we need to confront them. However, I would like to continue with our project, and rather than to capture the everyday life of late communist regime, we would like to pay attention to the process of formulating and passing on family memories. We would like to focus particularly on the interviewers and analyze how they perceive the narrator's story. With regard to current economic development in Europe, it can be expected that opinions on the practice of the state socialism would permanently polarize. Social stability and zero unemployment sounds tempting, don't you think so? Thank you for your attention.